Okay, welcome to Unit 4. This is absolutely my favorite unit, so much my favorite unit that I actually wrote the chapter, okay? That's my chapter, that's my photograph, my very, very historical photograph. I'm fortunate to have been old enough to have actually taken some workshops with some of the great photographers of recent history. Okay, Ansel Adams, had a workshop with Ansel Adams when I was at Duke University in the late 60s. Had a workshop with another photographer, famous photographer who pioneered color photography, named Ernst Haas, also at Duke. And it was really very, very exciting to be around people who are kind of pioneering photography. And don't forget, history is always something that's in the making. History is not dead, all right? History is very much alive. And for example, in rock and roll, I always like to refer to rock and roll because, you know, most of us like rock and roll music, or we all like music of some kind or another, okay? And rock and roll musicians have always studied their history. Okay, people who are really serious about a craft, they know the history of that craft. They know the history of that profession because that tells them who they are and that tells them where they're going. This is really critical, okay? So you go back to the origins of rock and roll music, which are really in the blues, all right? But you get Elvis Presley studying the blues. You get somebody like Eric Clapton from the Cream, okay, traveling to the United States to go to Memphis, to go to New Orleans, to look up and find some of the great blues singers of the times, all right, and study with them. And so you get this historical thread, right, that brings you to the present and then propels you into the future. So that's the point of history, okay? And I cover this in the textbook right at the very beginning. Why do we study these people? It's not about memorization, okay? It's not about trying to remember dates. It's not about even so much trying to remember names. Okay, here's a picture I took of Country Joe the Fish, right? I was also able to see the Grateful Dead, has some photographs of them. I don't think in the textbook. But I also have Janis Joplin, all right? So I was very interested in the history of music, and it relates to the history of photography because we build our craft, all right, on what came before. That doesn't mean we don't do breakout stuff. We do, all right? Like in rock and roll, you get Madonna, you get Lady Gaga. They're really breakout artists, okay? They really changed the game. That's tremendous, all right? The Beatles changed the game back in the 60s, all right? Elvis Presley changed the game, okay? And you get the same way of photography. Of course, digital photography has changed the game. But you get constantly new photographers who come along who keep making these almost radical changes. Much like in art, Picasso, okay, the Impressionists, radical changes that really upset the whole art world and yet created whole new ways of looking at art, whole new ways of being. Same way with photography, all right? So that's my interest in getting you to study this so that you feel that you're part of the conversation. One of the things IPFW tries very hard to do is to get you to understand that you're part of a learning community where you're actually building knowledge. This knowledge isn't being just poured into your head, okay? We're asking you to participate in the knowledge building. That's the whole point. And it makes you feel more in control of yourself, control of your life. And I want you to feel in control of your photography, control of visual communications, all right, control of your artistic expression. And to do this, you have to be part of this conversation, and that's the history. The history is the conversation, okay? So this unit is a little bit more intense than the others. It's not quite as technical. But it's very intense because there's a lot of what you'd accomplish, and at the end of it, you have to turn in a very, very sophisticated PowerPoint. And if you're not familiar with PowerPoint, that's part of visual communications. You're going to have some issues there you need to be working on, okay? So let me briefly run you down through the table of contents for the unit. Of course, I always give you the overview. I have some really excellent readings, I think. The textbook, I think, is excellent because I wrote that chapter, all right? But the other things I'd like to get you to look at are the readings. And I'm going to have to check on those. They don't seem to be wanting to come up. That's odd. We'll get that fixed. Of course, you have the textbook, as usual. Those readings, there they are. That's good. Then I have some web links I'd like for you to take a look at. The textbook, this is the textbook companion, which I also put together. But there's Teaching the Documents of the Civil War. There's the Denver Public Library, History of the West. There's Timothy O'Sullivan collection. The picture that I opened the chapter with, that's the great White House ruins at Canyon de Chelly in Timothy O'Sullivan actually originally took that photograph, so did Ansel Adams. The one you see there is the one I took, okay? This is in the Southwest. I took this picture. I went to great lengths to take this picture. And yes, I'm imitating somebody else's work. I'm doing that, all right, on purpose for that whole historical field. Plus, I wanted to see if I could accomplish that kind of photograph. They're not easy to take. I had to climb a cliff face to get this picture, okay? Plus you have all the different gray tones. There's a lot of effort and work that goes into such a photograph. And imagine people doing this in 1860, okay, with mules, giant cameras, that kind of thing. So what I'm doing with this companion website, this is item 3.4, is I'm allowing you to start thinking about who do you want to create your PowerPoint about. I'm asking you to take an historical figure, and by that I mean current too. History is current also, right? And presenting to the entire class a really well documented, really well thought out, really well analyzed presentation about this particular photographer. And I'm letting you choose that person, okay? So that's the companion website. Make sure you go down through that, get some ideas. Don't everyone do Ansel Adams, please, okay? We all love Ansel Adams. I understand that, okay? Then I have several lectures that I'd like for you to go through carefully. I have one on the invention of photography, one on masters of photography, and then I have an optional lecture on nude photography, and this is often a lot of fun. I have discussions about this that you're not required to do. I don't grade them, but I get a lot of lively discussion about that, and it's an interest that I had for years when I was much younger, nude photography, and I'd just like for you to take a look at it. It's quite an art form, and it really illustrates the history of photography. Okay, the whole history of painting was around nudes, and then early history of photography was around nudes. So classroom discussion, I asked you item 5.1, why do we study history? Item 5.2, I asked you to look at how photography and reform went together. Okay, almost politics and photography were very closely linked, particularly at one time during the big labor movements, all right, and then of course during the Vietnam War, very closely linked. Then I give you the optional discussion about nude photography. If some of you are uncomfortable, you don't have to do that discussion. Okay, it's still worth looking at though. Then I send you to a lot of historical resources to help give you some ideas about what you might want to do your presentation about. And then I give you a blog assignment. It's a very detailed blog assignment. You need to, by a certain date here, it's listed in the table of contents. It's just only about a week out, okay? You need to decide which photographer you're going to do your PowerPoint about, because the PowerPoint is very complex and I want you to start early. Then for the PowerPoint itself, I present you with the description, okay, that's item 8.1 in the table of contents. Then I give you an example of somebody who narrated the PowerPoint that's in Screen Toaster. You don't have to do it that way, but it's a lovely way to do it. Then I give you an example of a student who did theirs, traditional PowerPoint, which is also just fine. Then for item 8.4, we have a librarian associated with this class. She's the librarian for the reference librarian for visual communications. And she'll help you find good resource material about the photographer you choose. She'll even help you find a photographer, okay? I want this to be an academic project. This is not meant to be a Wikipedia project, okay? I can read Wikipedia just like the rest of you can. So don't just throw out Wikipedia at everybody. That's not a project, all right? That's a junior high school effort, all right? Item 8.5 is a whole bunch of different kinds of help in PowerPoint. Item 8.6 shows you how to compress your pictures in PowerPoint. PowerPoints can get very, very large. Don't let that happen to you, okay? Don't let that happen. It'll really mess you up, all right? Okay, I need to quit pretty soon. Item 8.7 is a detailed rubric. Item 8.7 is probably the most important item here in terms of your success for this project, all right? I spell out the criteria very carefully with the rubric. A rubric is a teaching tool and a learning tool as well as assessment tool. So make sure you look at item 8.7, look at the rubric very carefully. Okay, I tell you what's satisfactory, what's good, what's excellent, and different items ranging from your template to visual appeal, to the focus content, to the analytical content, to the use of scholarly sources. I really expect you to use scholarly sources. That's why we have a librarian associated with the class. And then I'd like for you to use some multimedia, at least some links to some YouTube lectures or some links to some Library of Congress sites or something like that. Throw some links in your PowerPoint so that this becomes an interactive type of a project, not just a bland standalone project. Okay, so if you have, and you'll submit this two places. Item 8.8 is where you submit it to me for grading. Okay, I can't grade in a public forum. And then item 8.9 is peer review. Peer review is very, very important. So please go over your table of contents very carefully. Pay a lot of attention to the rubric. That's where you're going to make or break this. I grade right along the lines of the rubric, all right? And make sure you submit it two places, item 8.8 and 8.9. Okay, if you have questions, you know how to get a hold of me.